All right, let's talk about Grady Hendrix's wild ride of a novel, How to Sell a Haunted House. This is a book that kicks off with a very real, very sad family tragedy, and then spirals into a place that is just so much creepier. And to really get just how creepy we're talking, you only need to hear two words: puppet ministry. Yeah, that's a real thing, but in this book, oh man, it becomes the source of some truly unforgettable horror. It's the perfect way to understand this book's very specific, very strange energy. What's so brilliant about it is the bait and switch. It pulls you in with this painfully realistic story about grief and dealing with your parents' stuff. But before you can get comfortable, that story takes a sharp, terrifying right turn into a full-on supernatural nightmare. And the way it shifts is just seamless. So let's actually set that initial stage, because long before any puppets start moving, this house is already haunted by something we can all recognize: just pure heavy grief. It all gets started when our main character, Louise, gets that awful call. Her parents have died. So she has to fly back home to Charleston, she has to deal with her brother, Mark, who she basically can't stand, and they have to figure out how to sell their childhood home. It's a situation that feels so real, it kind of grounds the whole story before things go completely off the rails. And this right here, this is the whole cocktail. You've got your classic, creepy, haunted house story, but then you layer on the absolute horror of evil puppets, the super uncomfortable tension of messy sibling drama, and just this deep sense of grief. That's the special blend Hendrix is serving up. So, how does all that stuff come together to make this book so great? Well, it really comes down to this incredible mix of genuine, honest-to-God horror and a surprising amount of emotional heart. I mean, Hendrix is an absolute master at crafting scenes that are just genuinely unsettling. He specializes in this slow, creeping dread that just builds and builds. And the puppets, seriously, he uses them to create these nightmare moments that will stick in your brain for a long time. But then, and this is key, just when the tension is almost too much to handle, he hits you with something that is just absurdly funny. And that mix, it keeps you totally off balance. The humor doesn't cancel out the horror. If anything, it makes it sharper, making the scares hit even harder when they pop up. And this gets to the real heart of it. This isn't just about jump scares. The haunting is a giant metaphor. It's all about how a family's unspoken history, all the secrets and the trauma and the grudges, can trap and control you just as much as any ghosts ever could. So you've really got the horror working on two separate tracks. On the surface, you've got the supernatural stuff: the creaky house, the possessed dolls, the whole 9 yards. But bubbling right underneath is the emotional horror, which honestly might be even scarier: the unresolved family trauma and all that simmering resentment. And Hendrix makes sure that horror feels real and specific. This isn't just some vague, spooky presence. No, this is the tactile, almost grotesque horror of dolls, puppets, and ventriloquist dummies. It's that awful feeling of an inanimate object just staring at you from across a dark room. The book wants you to picture every single creepy detail. Okay, now as much as there is to love here, this book's very unique flavor means it is definitely not for everyone. So let's talk about a few warnings, a few reasons why you might want to steer clear. First up, a question that gets at the biggest criticism of this book. Can something be too over the top? Because, and I'm not going to spoil anything, the last third of this novel, it escalates a lot. The book starts with this awesome slow burn of subtle dread, but it ends with this just wild, bonkers, almost cartoonishly intense spectacle. Now, some people absolutely love how audacious it is. But if you're someone who likes your horror quiet and restrained, you might just find the ending to be a bit much. And here's another big one. Do you need to like your main characters? Because Louise and her brother Mark are, let's just say they're challenging. They're flawed, they're petty, they're stubborn, and sometimes you just want to yell at them. They feel very real, but they are not always likable. And finally, just a quick rundown of some pretty serious content warnings. The story is built around the death of parents and deals a lot with grief. It also has child endangerment, themes of religious trauma, and some seriously graphic violence and body horror. It's intense, both emotionally and visually. So, with all of that on the table, let's get down to it. The verdict. How do you know if How to Sell a Haunted House is actually the right book for you? Well, this book is probably going to be for you if you love horror that mixes genuine scares with some really dark humor. It's for you if you're looking for a haunted house story that does something totally new. And this is a big one, if you want your horror to have real emotional depth about family and grief. On the other hand, you might want to sit this one out if you have a serious, deep-seated fear of puppets or dolls. Also, if you prefer quiet, atmospheric horror over something that's wild and action-packed, or if you really truly need to root for good, sympathetic heroes. And if we break it all down by the numbers, you can see the horror set pieces and the sheer originality are huge highlights, both getting a 4.5 out of 5. The characters in the family drama are also really strong, out of 4. The only real wild card is that tone balance, because that mix of horror and comedy is just so subjective. All of which brings us to a strong final score, a solid 4 out of 5 stars. It's a smart, incredibly weird, and unforgettable horror novel that absolutely accomplishes what it sets out to do. And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on. The book is filled with ghosts and puppets and all sorts of supernatural stuff, but the real question it makes you ask is, which one is actually harder to escape, a haunted house or a haunted family?